Patricia Hearst, the kidnapped heiress of the mid-1970s who ended up on the cover of Newsweek magazine 7 times, has written a mystery novel, Murder at San Simeon. So you're 19 years old, and I know you've been through this, but I've never talked to you about it, never even heard you talk about it. I know the story, but you're 19 years old, you're living with your boyfriend, it's 9 o'clock at night, as I understand it, and what happens?
There's a knock on the door, and someone saying that they'd hit a car, and I assumed it was mine, of course, because...
Right. Why knock on your door?
And all of a sudden, people burst into the apartment with guns, threw me on the ground, tied me up, dragged me out.
How many people?
Oh, I hardly remember anymore.
4 or 5?
Yeah.
With guns. And where's your boyfriend? They just hold him at bay.
Well, he was actually beaten very badly, and then he managed to escape, and then I was taken out between the apartment buildings where, there was a corridor. So the neighbors, had looked out, and they ended up being shot at, and that was the start of it.
And you later came to believe that the FBI knew that there was going to be a kidnap.
Oh, they did know. They did know. There was not a came to believe. They, after it happened, they did finally tell my parents that there had been a list. And in my case, there was more than a list. There was the actual plan of the kidnapping. They had the classes I went to where I lived. They'd been following me. And they told my parents and kind of said, gee, sorry.
Why wouldn't they have warned you or protected you or done? Why wouldn't they do that?
They said that they thought they had them on the run and that they'd be arresting them any time now. And then they said, and besides, Mrs. Hearst, what could you have done about it? And my mom just said, well, we would have taken her out of school. She wouldn't have been in that apartment. What do you mean? They couldn't even believe that they were being told a thing like that.
What was the purpose of the Symbionese Liberation Army? Why would they want to kidnap you? Did they ask for money?
They had 2 members of their group arrested, which is how the plan was originally uncovered. They tried to burn down their safe house, and it was unsuccessful.
Who tried to burn it down?
The rest of the members of this group. And so what they were hoping for, aside from, a revolution in this country, which would, I suppose, put them in power, was that I would be exchanged for their comrades that were being held.
Did they ask for money?
They asked for all kinds of things. They asked for food to be distributed. They never actually asked for a monetary ransom like your nice normal kidnapper would ask for. So it just went on and on and on. There were always new demands.
And where's
Symbionese?
Symbionese Liberation Army? What's Symbionese? What is it? Is that an African? I don't even know what it is.
I think okay, now we're really getting into ancient history. It had something to do with symbiosis.
Oh, it doesn't. Is this a mixed group? Is it a white group? Is it an African American group?
It was one black man and a lot of white.
So it's a mixed color group.
Yes.
And you are taken to a place and put in a closet.
Put in a closet.
For, as I understand it, 57 days.
Yeah, blindfolded, tied,
And you're 19 years old, and you were abused at that
really, really scared, and looking like it would never come to an end. Well, not to any end that I would like, and.
And what were they doing? They were sexually, they were, and they were...
re-educating.
And they were talking to you about their cause.
Yeah, they were pretty much giving me things to memorize and drilling me about what it was they believed, and...
under threat of death, not to pay attention to them.
Right.
You knew you had to.
Yeah, this is like the ultimate pop quiz at the end of every one of these sessions.
And you began to try to pass these tests.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I definitely tried hard to, get the answers right. And of course, there's no discussion in those kinds of sessions. You just get the answer right, and that means whatever they expect you to say.
Why did they have you in a closet?
So I couldn't escape, I guess.
Just to lock you in a closet.
So yeah, someplace to lock somebody up.
For 57 days?
Yeah.
And at some point, do you begin to identify with their cause?
It wasn't a matter of identifying. I'm not sure where the line was crossed from where I believed that I had no other choice but to stay with them. I know that pretty early on I was afraid to even think any thoughts that were my own, because they were yelling at me for even thinking about being rescued because they were afraid of psychics. And you find yourself doing things because you're so frightened that it starts to sound reasonable that your thoughts might even get you into trouble with them. And
so even alone in the closet, you were careful what you were doing.
It's just incredible. They have so much power over you, and people are very fragile. You know, you just can't do that to people without...
Even out of a closet, just in everyday life.
Yeah, you just can't torture someone, even if you don't have them in a closet, and expect them not to finally have a reaction that's not good for them.
And this is before anyone ever heard of the Stockholm Syndrome, where captives begin to identify with their captors.
Right.
This is before that.
This is when, you know, I don't even know what people were thinking, because, you know,
It's pretty unusual.
Today, when someone's captured, you know, whether it's a soldier or whomever, you know, nobody just believes anything that comes out of their mouths.
Anything they do or say after that, we kind of disregard it, and
that's
we know
right.
that because we've seen it many
That's
times.
right, and they're always taken away and debriefed for a couple of weeks and allowed to get a grip on themselves.
Okay, we're coming up to a break, and then we'll be back with Patricia Hearst, and we'll continue with this amazing saga.
Good evening. Patty Hearst has been taken into custody. The FBI says Patty Hearst was picked up today in San Francisco. The Hearst newspaper heiress has been missing for 19 months. First, she was kidnapped. Then she announced that she had joined ranks with her kidnappers, members of the Symbionese Liberation Army. She called herself Tanya. She was later indicted in connection with a San Francisco bank holdup and labeled a fugitive.
Oh, sorry to put you through all this, but once you're into this, you're really, at some point you become part of this group.
Well, like he's saying, you know, I called myself nothing. I mean, you know, they
called you
they
Tanya.
called me that, and I did whatever they said.
Were you involved with anyone in the group romantically?
Well, no, but that was part of their whole drama. That, yes, exactly, to, I guess, personalize the group. And
you remember when there was a conversation about we're going to go rob a bank? Do you remember that?
Well, that was right after they took the blindfold off. They said that's what they were going to do. And the bank was actually owned by the family of my best friend. And I did not tell them that, because if I'd said anything like that, they would have killed everybody in the bank. And afterward, they were upset, and they said, why didn't you say anything about it? And I said, oh, well, I wanted you to pick it based on, you know, which bank was the best one to rob, and not just because of this reason. And they seemed to accept that as a legitimate excuse. But it was so horrific.
At that point, what are you feeling? Can you remember? Do you feel like you're part of this group and you hope you can have a successful bank robbery?
Well, at that point, there wasn't much to it, except I was going to go in the bank, and they had cut all my hair off, so I was wearing a wig in that. And I just wanted to get through it alive, because if I hadn't done it correctly, I was going to be killed.
So you were really there as a captive, even as
I was there as, you know, they had gone to the bank ahead of time. They had figured out where the best place to be for the cameras were.
To be away from the cameras.
No, in front of the cameras.
They
not
wanted
away.
to be in front of the
Yes, they wanted me right in the middle of the cameras. That's
Why?
not because they wanted everybody to see me robbing the bank.
That it was you.
Yes, that's. I mean, the idea that that was some kind of a mistake is so ludicrous to me. They didn't do anything that wasn't for purposes of their own propaganda. All of their tapes and their messages, and then this was just one more step. They had gone in, they had checked to see, you know, where the camera pointed to, and they knew exactly where they would be seen the least, and I would get maximum visibility.
And at the time, you just want to get through it and not be killed. You don't really know
they did
what the Symbionese. They shot what?
They shot somebody in the bank, and everything just went black at that point. I don't even remember getting out of the bank and back in the car.
Were you driving?
No, I wasn't driving. I was sitting in the back between two other people. And
you fired a gun in the air?
No.
You didn't even fire a gun?
The gun didn't work, so wasn't even an issue.
So you're really in the middle of something, and you're just basically wishing to be a free person, let me out of this whole thing.
I'm just wishing to get through this in one piece and hoping nobody gets hurt, and just, you know, including myself, and just get out of there. And afterward, they were thrilled with the robbery. They thought it went off really, really well. They were, you know, couldn't have been more pleased.
Do you know how much money they got?
Oh, it was $10,000.
And they went back.
They had it down to the penny. I remember that. I mean, I think they just added a couple of pennies to be cute.
Where are they now? Do you know?
Two of them are still alive, and I don't know where they are. They were never, those two were never charged with a bank robbery. The rest were killed in Los Angeles.
By whom?
By the FBI and Los Angeles police. There was a shootout in Los Angeles, and they stayed in a house and were burned to death.
And this is how long after this bank robbery?
A few months.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not that long after.
6 months, maybe, or, you know, 3 months.
How do you get out of this? You're back within the apartment now. You're not in the closet, but you're part of the group, and they're watching you. Do they think you'd leave if you could? They don't know.
Oh, well, yeah, you know, they have bolts on the doors. In fact, during my trial, the prosecutor had said, well, why didn't you just pick up a gun and shoot them all? And my sister said afterward, God, could you imagine you'd be charged with all those murders, too?
How did you get out?
How did I get out?
How were you ultimately, you were arrested?
Finally,
How?
yes. How? Well, you know, I'd like to say fabulous police work, but, you know, it took them forever to finally track down this group. And I'm not really sure what it was that finally, you know, got the FBI to wherever they finally found them.
And you were there with some of the members of the group, and the FBI broke in, captured everybody.
Yeah.
And captured you and took you off to jail.
Right.
Right? Now you know you're going to jail, and you're going to be charged for participation, I guess, in a bank robbery, right?
Right.
So at some point there, you start to look around for an attorney. Or your family does.
Yes, please.
Your family does. You're not looking around much of anything.
I'm blaming my parents for this.
Right, okay. They start to look, and a very prominent attorney at the time is F. Lee Bailey.
Yes.
And they secure the services of F. Lee Bailey, and you are going on trial with the other members of the...
No. They were not charged. In fact, the government apparently asked them if they would testify against me, but their revolutionary principles prohibited that.
They were not charged?
No.
What about the other people in the bank robbery?
The rest were dead, and the two that were left alive were not charged.
Why weren't they charged, you know?
Their name wasn't Hearst. I don't know. You know, this is a mystery.
So you are the one going on trial for this bank robbery.
That's right.
And this is in where? In Los Angeles?
San Francisco.
In San Francisco. And the potential penalty for armed robbery must be 20 and up.
Yes, yeah.
It's considerable, and you are thinking...
I don't know what, I think there's a lot of leeway, but you know...
Could be anything. And given what you've been through at that time, you can imagine anything could happen to you.
I mean, that wasn't even really what I was thinking of so much.
What were you thinking of?
Well, for a while, you know, I was still in the jail with one of my kidnappers, and so I was kind of thinking about her, and then once she left, I was kind of not thinking about anything but what they told me for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden it hit me that I didn't have to think what they thought anymore. It was just astounding. It was like this incredible weight being lifted. I could think my own thoughts.
We'll go to a break. We'll be back and hear what happened. So suddenly you're in the jail cell. F. Lee Bailey has been hired as your attorney, famous for the Shepard murder case, so your parents knew of him, I'm sure, from that. And you're sitting in your cell, and you realize you don't have to think somebody else's thoughts anymore. You can think your own. I'm sure at this point it's hard to know what your own are, because how old are you then? Now you're about 21. I
think I was 20.
20 years old. So you...
20, 21, yeah, you're right, I'm somewhere in there.
So you're coming out of the brainwash state, or did anyone deprogram you?
Yeah, I was seeing a psychiatrist, so I wasn't really thinking too much very clearly.
Right. And this person helped you come back to yourself.
Yeah.
which at this point has to be a pretty fragmented young woman.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Most 19-year-olds are pretty fragmented anyway.
Without this, right. And now you meet F. Lee Bailey, and he's going to get you off on this bank robbery charge, and you're told he's an important, formidable attorney. And do you remember any impression of him before you began to realize he wasn't that good? What was your first impressions of him?
Well, I'm trying to think. When the first time I saw him, he was not there really. He was there, I guess, at the beginning, and then trial preparation was sort of done by Al Johnson, who was his associate, and then he was back in for the trial. And I just didn't give it that much thought, really. I have to say, I was just such a mess that that isn't what I was thinking about. Yeah.
Did you expect to be acquitted?
Well, I mean, when we're talking about it now, no. Then I think I just thought that I would be convicted just because
you were there.
I was there. And the press was so bad at the time, and people were so hostile, and I really didn't see any way to be acquitted. Although today, thinking back on it, it's pretty remarkable that you can take a person who was kidnapped and, you know, in a bank with guns pointing at them and get a jury to find them guilty. It's astounding, quite frankly.
Right,
but
so you thought you would be found what, guilty, not guilty?
I thought I would be found guilty. In fact, when the jury came in, the marshals who had been taking me back and forth to the trial were saying that they were sure I was going to be found not guilty, that they wanted to take me out later, and I just didn't believe it. No, just take me out,
just into the world a little bit,
just well, just like to congratulate me and wish me luck, and I just didn't believe it.
And you were right.
And I was right.
You were found guilty, and you were sentenced to 7 years.
Yes.
And you served 23 months of those 7 years. And what are your feelings about F. Lee Bailey's handling of the case?
Well, you know, now we're getting into...
you have to be careful what you say?
Well, frankly, because you've heard, I'm sure, you've heard him say that I violated a court order by making derogatory remarks about him. Well, first of all, there was no court order, and I can think of a lot of unattractive things that can be inferred from somebody, you know, or about someone who would violate a court order. And I have been talking to my lawyer about this. When you get into that...
But do you have any constraints on being able to speak about it?
Well, it's just, you know, his big thing is that I have somehow violated the attorney-client privilege, and first of all, that's not true. And second of all, if I were to discuss that, then he would be entitled to defend his actions, and I just feel like I'm getting into an area where I just don't feel like
you didn't think you got the best representation you could have gotten.
I'm at the point now where I think he ought to just get a new hobby and talk about someone else, and I cannot believe that he's still going on about this.
Is he responding to your comments, or is he initiating the comments?
He's initiating the comments.
At this point, he's initiating the comments.
He's initiating the comments. This is, from what I can understand, and it's hard to understand, he seems to be wanting to sell a book. What we did sign was called an agreement in principle, and he violated it 3 days after signing it. That was in 1981, and after he did this several times, my lawyer sent his lawyer a letter and said, you violated the agreement, we consider it null and void, it's been breached, that's that. So whatever he's talking about now, I don't know where it's coming from. I can only guess that he wants to sell a book, and using my name will help him sell a book. And
well, he's a man who said there was no evidence linking O.J. Simpson to those murders.
That's the other person I'm tired of hearing about.
And he's a man who said that the government somehow gave him what ended up being in excess of $20 million to defend a drug dealer. So that kind of speaks for itself who F. Lee Bailey is. You've written a novel with the name of which is
Murder at San Simeon.
Murder at San Simeon, and there was an actual death at San Simeon years ago. The famous publisher, is it Thomas Ince, is that right?
Thomas Ince. And there was a death on my grandfather's yacht, or after he was removed from the yacht. And so what I did is I've moved the death up to San Simeon. I find myself in the, unique position, I guess, along with Orson Welles, of now being banned from San Simeon, which I think is hilarious.
You are? Can you be banned from San?
It's a state park, but apparently they're so upset about this that they,
because you said a novel where murder takes place.
That's right. I'm never to darken their doorstep again or something. So I'm considering going through the entire California state park system or something and murdering people all over the place. But
in a book, you mean?
In a book.
Right, yeah. Because earlier we were talking as Tanya. You don't want to resurrect that.
No, we don't know.
And this man it was reported that he died of acute indigestion but that's
and gunshots
most people don't die of acute indigestion though, do they?
Not unless they had an awful lot to drink and it was prohibition and it was illegal. But there were also reports of gunshots. It's remained one of the big Hollywood mysteries because everything was hushed up in those days. And, you know, people like to believe a good scandal.
And your co-author is also from a Biddle family,
yeah.
right? Now, who are the Biddles?
They came to this country on the Mayflower, and they've been here ever since.
What have they been doing all this time, those Biddles? What do they do? I know who the Hearsts are, but I don't really know who the Biddles are. I really don't.
You have to get the Biddles on here to talk about it.
What did they do when they got here, after they got here on the Mayflower? What was their business or their profession?
I'm not entirely sure. You know,
Really?
It's a long time ago. I wasn't there.
You just throw that name out. And your co-author is named?
Cordelia Frances Biddle.
Cordelia. It sounds like, you know, come on. It sounds like somebody has to go like that a little bit, you know. Well, you seem so well now. It's good to see you've come through all this. I'm sure it's a horrific journey because, you know, most people's are is without this story. Most people's journey through life is rough enough without this horrible thing happening, but it makes you more unique. I guess that's the only way to look at it, right?
Well, I mean, it certainly is something that I wouldn't want to relive ever. It's, you know, unfortunately something I didn't ever have to live,
right.
But you know, I just think I've really tried to make a life in spite of it and move ahead and have my children and have a family and a real life and write and not let it stop me from doing what I want to do.
There was a play on Broadway years ago called Look, We've Come Through, and I would think that applies to you. Look, she's come through. So thanks, Patricia, for
Thank you.
coming here. The name of the book is Murder at San Simeon, and I don't know, the Hearst probably didn't come over on the Mayflower, but they made a lot of, you know, fuss after they got here, wherever they came from. So it's... we
were on the next boat.
You're on the next boat after the Mayflower. So we'll go to a break, and we'll be back with Morton Downey Jr., who has, thank God, recovered from recent lungs cancer surgery, and Patrick Reynolds, the heir to the Reynolds Tobacco Company, was never kidnapped, but did see his father dying of emphysema, and it's only his only memory of his father. We'll go to a break, and we'll hear about what these two fighters against the tobacco industry have to say. Be right back.
It's no romance, it's a vice. It's something that you start when you stress and you get addicted. Like all other things, it's a vice. Then you're addicted to it and you're fighting it the rest of your life. If you ever did it, you're gonna be fighting it. So for all y'all little people that not to want to smoke, don't smoke. But for y'all to do, it's one with you forever. You're gonna smoke the rest of your life. All right, man.
Members of their group arrested, which is how the plan was originally uncovered. They tried to burn down their safe house, and it was unsuccessful.
Who tried to burn it down?
The rest of the members of this group. And so what they were hoping for, aside from, you know, a revolution in this country, which would, I suppose, put them in power, was that I would be exchanged for their comrades that were being held.
Did they ask for money?
They asked for all kinds of things. They asked for food to be distributed. They never actually asked for a monetary ransom like your nice normal kidnapper would ask for. So it just went on and on and on. There were always new demands.
And where's
Symbionese?
Symbionese Liberation Army. What's Symbionese? What is it? Is that an African? I don't even know what it is.
I think it, okay, now we're really getting into ancient history. It had something to do with symbiosis.
Oh, it doesn't. Is this a mixed group? Is it a white group? Is it an African American group?
It was one black man and a lot of white
So it's a
kids.
mixed color group.
Yes.
And you are taken to a place and put in a closet.
Put in a closet.
As I understand it, 57 days.
Yeah, blindfolded, tied, you know.
And you're 19 years old. And you were abused at
And
that
really, really scared. And looking like it would never come to an end. And in my case, there was more than a list. There was the actual plan of the kidnapping. They had the classes I went to where I lived. They'd been following me. And they told my parents and kind of said, gee, sorry.
Why wouldn't they have warned you or protected you or done? Why wouldn't they do that?
They said that they thought they had them on the run and that they'd be arresting them any time now. And then they said, and besides, Mrs. Hearst, what could you have done about it? And my mom just said, well, we would have taken her out of school. She wouldn't have been in that apartment. What do you mean? They couldn't even believe that they were being told a thing like that.
What was the purpose of the Symbionese Liberation Army? Why would they want to kidnap you? Did they ask for money?
They asked for, they had 2 members.
Patricia Hearst, the kidnapped heiress of the mid-1970s who ended up on the cover of Newsweek magazine 7 times, has written a mystery novel, Murder at San Simeon. So you're 19 years old, and I know you've been through this, but I've never talked to you about it, never even heard you talk about it. I know the story, but you're 19 years old, you're living with your boyfriend, it's 9 o'clock at night, as I understand it, and what happens?
There's a knock on the door, and someone saying that they'd hit a car, and I assumed it was mine, of course, because... Right. Why knock on your door? And all of a sudden, people burst into the apartment with guns, threw me on the ground, tied me up, dragged me out.
How many people?
Oh, I hardly remember anymore.
4 or 5?
Yeah.
With guns. And where's your boyfriend? They just hold him at bay.
Well, he was actually beaten very badly, and then he managed to escape, and then I was taken out between the apartment buildings where, there was a corridor. So the neighbors, had looked out, and they ended up being shot at, and that was the start of it.
And you later came to believe that the FBI knew that there was going to be a kidnap.
Oh, they did know. They did know. There was not a came to believe. They, after it happened, they did finally tell my parents that there had been a list.